Carol Wright was a retired, independent woman who loved her family and loved being outdoors. She lived her life on her terms, while all the time silently helping people in need in her community.
She was just always the aunt that was willing to play. If we had a game, she was first one in playing a game. The typical, every family has one, the fun aunt. Whenever we got together for family celebrations and gatherings, holidays, we were big game players. And, she was first one, I'm playing, let's go. And hopefully you didn't play her in Scrabble.
Carol was a traveler. She liked to go places. She would always go to Sanibel Island with her sisters in the summer and hang out at the beach.
We would meet at Sanibel and for a week and rent a little house there and go to the beach. She loved the beach, and she loved the three of us being together. She loved life.
She was very easy to get to know. But as we got older, I started to realize all the things she had done. And I was like, wow. Whenever Bon Appetit was put out, monthly or weekly, she had an article in it every time.
Carol was enthusiastic. Anybody who spoke to Carol, she was infectious. Her enthusiasm was infectious. And she was always positive.
As a role model, I think Carol served as somebody who said you can do whatever you want as a woman. She graduated and went to the University of Miami, and that's, especially in Florida back then, we were a little rural, and you didn't do that as a woman. And then in a matter of years, she took off to California and, again, just did what she wanted in a time that women didn't do that. She did what she wanted when she wanted and showed me that it's possible.
She had a variety of jobs there. She worked for Hanna-Barbera for a while. She worked for a variety of TV and movies as production manager. And then she did a lot of freelance work out there. And she started as a researcher for Bon Appetit and then got promoted to writing a column for them. And that's what she was doing when she decided she wanted to move back to Florida because our parents were getting older.
After Carol moved back to Florida, she worked for a number of years as a reporter before taking her last job as a media specialist for the county property appraiser's office.
I know that she was like the media contacts, the media liaison, and got calls from reporters about whatever their questions would be and, and funnel them to Gary and come back with the answer. And she also did the employee newsletter, and I think she really had fun doing the employee newsletter because people really like the recognition when they're named for doing a charitable thing or whatever the project is in the employee newsletter. And she also appreciated that Gary trusted her and let her be fairly independent in what she did for the property appraiser's office.
We were both reporters for different papers. I liked her because she was friendly, but she was to the point. And she didn't take anything off of anybody. She was good. She was a good reporter. And I liked that about her. She was honest. We were friends, but we weren't as close as we became when we both retired from journalism.
She got me involved in the YWCA, the Battered Women's Shelter. I served on the board with her for a little while back in the 80s. And I know more recently, she had been volunteering for a group called Common Ground, which helps, I believe, homeless people.
She was a feminist, to say the least. And she believed in the downtrodden, and she believed in helping them out when she could. And she also volunteered for at a women's shelter. And for her church, she wrote the newsletter. This was all after she retired from tax assessor's office, was her last full-time job. And she did all this then after she retired.
She loved animals, and she was, she was always involved with whatever animal shelter. She always got dogs that she had from shelters, and some of whom need extra help.
She had just lost her dog, and I'm sure she was waiting a little while, but she'd have a dog because she's a dog lover. She's an animal lover, you know, no matter what animal she would take their side.
Like all of us, Carol was happy that the COVID restrictions were abating and she was able to get out and do the things she loved.
She was so happy that she was back on her bicycle and out riding. She loved to ride.
She was very active, and she stayed very active right up to the end. She just kept on going, and especially riding her bike. She loved that.
She tried to ride it every day, and if the weather was good, she did, if she didn't have other appointments or anything, you know, but just something about being on her bicycle that just freed her, and she went all over with it.
She really enjoyed being outside, being independent at 72, 73 years old, you know, driving to wherever she went, she still drove, you know, and if she didn't feel like driving, she would hop on the bike. And, you know, that's where her enjoyment came from, you know, family, you know, still being able to write, still being a vital part of the community with the volunteering that she did. So it was just another part of her life that, you know, I have this whole world ahead of me now.
She really enjoyed the idea of her retirement and the fact that she could do whatever she wanted at her own timing for the people who she has always wanted to serve, and serving her community and helping other people. That really gave her a real deep joy.
The last few months before her tragic incident, she was really enjoying life. The weather was good in South Florida, like it always is. She was on her bike as much as she could, even if it was down the block to the grocery store or to the library, and, you know, that was close to her. Every few days or a couple of weeks, she would make the trip over to Palm Beach to her favorite, you know, bookstore. And you could really see the joy in her face when she would tell you, I went over to the bookstore, I went to, you know, downtown West Palm on my bike. It was, you know, gorgeous day, and I feel really good.
I remember her saying to Lee, my son, she said, I don't think I've ever been happier. I feel so good. And just, I'm so glad that things are getting better as far as the pandemic is concerned, and we're able to do a few more things than we had been doing. I'm glad to be back on my bicycle and being able to ride that. And so she was just in a great mood and she was just feeling great about life.
Carol Wright had lived what most of us would term a good life. She had worked in several rewarding careers, and she had retired healthy and comfortable. She spent her days riding her bike, visiting family, and continuing to help others in need. No one could have foreseen the horrific events that led to her terrifying death on February the 6th, 2022.
I had heard that a woman had fallen off the bridge in West Palm Beach. And you think, you know, West Palm Beach is large, you don't think you're going to know the person. But then a friend at our church, texted me and said, Heather, is the Carol Wright who fell off the bridge our Carol Wright? And so I quickly went on Google and I looked it up, and the first article I saw a picture of her, and I was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's my Carol. I'm like, and I just couldn't believe it.
It was odd because the day that it happened, I heard on the news in Charlotte that a woman had fallen off the bridge. And I had called my sister that day, and she hadn't answered. And she had a cell phone and a home phone, and she didn't answer either phone. Then I saw this on TV, and I thought, that couldn't be her. She said it was a woman riding her bike. So I called my sister Judy, and I said, Judy, have you heard from Carol today? And she said, no, I haven't called her today. I think I talked to her yesterday. And I told her what I'd heard. And she says, well, I'll call her and see if she answers. So she called and didn't get an answer. And she said, well, I'm going to drive over, because she only lived like 10 minutes away from my sister Carol. And she said when she drove up, her Sunday paper was in the driveway, and Carol was a big proponent of reading the newspaper every morning on her front porch. She loved to sit on her porch and read. And she said her car was still in the garage, in the driveway, and she looked through the window, and her bike was missing because she put it in the side sunroom, kept it inside. And she said, I knew that it was Carol.
This 911 call came from a bystander who helplessly watched Carol's tragic death.
911, where's the location of your emergency?
I'm here by the bridge. He was in the middle of the bridge when the bridge is like starting up, and I was like with my cable, and I saw her. When I saw her, she was pregnant. I think she said, I don't know if she's still alive.
When the police arrived, the bridge tender, Artuzia Polk, had already contacted her supervisor, Kathy Harper. The two women immediately colluded and chose to lie to the police.
In her statement to police, the bridge tender working that day, identified as Artuzia Polk, said that she walked out onto the balcony 3 times before opening the bridge at 1 in the afternoon. However, according to the arrest report, cameras from the Palm Beach Police Department show that the last time that Polk had walked out onto the balcony was 9:03 in the morning. Now, a search warrant for Polk's phone also showed that after the incident, she was texting with the person who was named as the supervisor in the incident report. The supervisor sent a message instructing Polk what to tell police in her statement. Now, the supervisor also told Polk to delete the text messages. Now, there is also a text message to another person. That's at 3:44 in the afternoon that day that says this, quote, I am here with police. I killed a lady on the bridge.
Carol, who cautiously chose to walk her bicycle across the bridge, became trapped when the gate suddenly came down. She was locked in a square box. As the bridge began to rise beneath her, Carol desperately tried to hang on for nearly 7 minutes as the bridge rose nearly straight in the air and stopped. Carol frantically held on for as long as she could. Eventually, her strength waning, Carol lost her grip and fell nearly 70 feet. Her body struck the concrete foundation underneath the bridge. When first responders were finally able to reach Carol, she had already died from her injuries.
When I first heard about how the accident happened, I thought, I hope it was only a few seconds and she didn't know what hit her. And then after I heard more, I thought it was probably a good couple of minutes. Imagine having to be trying to frantically save your life for a couple of minutes. I can't imagine. And then after the celebration of life, when I talked to her niece, who said it was 7 minutes, I was horrified. I was just horrified.
It's to the point where I don't even like to be in the vicinity of that bridge because the imagination starts to go to where I think about those last several minutes of what she went through. And as somebody that I consider relatively young as myself, how I would have handled that. And then you're putting somebody in that position as a 79-year-old that, is going to do her best to fight for her life, no matter their physical strength. And she fought for her life for probably what seemed a lifetime to her. And it was wiped out in a matter of minutes.
How could it happen? For somebody not to do their job and to take somebody's life like that, I can't.
Every time I go over a drawbridge down here, for some reason it's been up. And I'm going through the same horror again.
And then I learned that she had fallen on concrete. That's all I can imagine, how scared she must have been and how she must have been yelling and calling for help. And That's the thing that wakes me up every morning. Just thinking about her falling and how scared she had to be.
There were no precautions taken that they're supposed to walk around and look 2 or 3 times and just everything that was supposed to have been done, none of it was done. It was a tragedy that happened that shouldn't have happened. If the policies were followed by the gate tender, had been followed, my sister would still be alive. And then when the police arrested her and showed her the evidence that they had, she recanted. She admitted she had lied.
The police investigation included viewing all of the surveillance footage on the bridge. What that conclusively showed was that the bridge tender, Artesia Polk, had not done any of the 3 visual checks she is required to do every time she raises the bridge. In fact, those same cameras showed that Polk had not bothered to do the required visual checks for over 4 hours. During that time, Polk raised the bridge on 8 separate occasions, each time placing dozens of cars, pedestrians, and bicyclists in unnecessary danger.
That was so preventable. That should have never happened. And it bothers me to my core that so many other people this could have happened to on that bridge that day, because there were mothers and babies and strollers and bikers and pedestrians. My Aunt Carol took safety to a level that most of us don't. And I say that by even just her bike. I grew up, we biked, we didn't wear helmets. She biked, she wore a helmet. Everything about her was cautious.
But as far as a citizen, she was a rule follower. If somebody gave her a rule, she followed it. Just like when she was riding her bike. The rule was you walk your bike across the bridge. That's what she did. You don't ride it, you walk it.
All I can say is I hope the angels carried her down and she didn't suffer, but I can't imagine the terror she went through. That above all else. It was so avoidable, this tragedy. Didn't have to happen.
I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again to anybody, and I don't care how long it takes me. This is not going to happen to anybody else again, because the one word that I always come up with is it was preventable.
I'm thinking about what Carol was feeling and what she was going through in her mind during those 7 minutes. She must have known she was going to die.
It really rocked us, and what was so astounding for myself even just were the amount of personal notes and phone calls that I got from people that she had touched in a volunteer sort of way, in a charity sort of way that I didn't know. And that was hard to take because I didn't know she was doing this. So when you take away somebody who was doing this behind the scenes and so many people were touched, it even made it that much harder to realize she's not there anymore. A lot of people lost her, not just her family.
Carol Wright did what the regulations tell you to do: walk your bike across the bridge. Because she followed the rules, she became trapped by the very devices supposedly meant to protect her.
It was a horrific accident. An elderly woman plunges to her death when a drawbridge opens. 79-year-old Carol Wright was walking with her bike across the Royal Park Bridge, a route she often took from her home in West Palm Beach to her favorite bookstore in ritzy Palm Beach. She was halfway across when the bridge opened and she could not get off in time. Lance Ivy is an attorney for Carol Wright's family.
She's literally hanging on for dear life, clinging with these 79-year-old hands and arms as best as she can do for several minutes, and she gave it a valiant effort, and unfortunately, just her arms gave out.
In a Facebook Live today on WPTV.com, we spoke to attorney Lance Ivy, who is representing Wright's family.
So I believe that when we get the video evidence of this incident, it will reveal unequivocally that the bridge tender's statement doesn't align with the true facts. Again, you wouldn't need any other additional remedies if the bridge tenders follow the basic protocols. If they get out of their chair and go out to the balcony and do these visual inspections.
When the bridge tender pushed that button to lift that bridge, that was basically giving Carol a slow mental and physical death sentence is all she did right there. Our goal is that will never, ever, ever happen to another family. She starts on the east side over here, and as instructed, she gets off of her bicycle and walks over the bridge, pushing her bicycle. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what they mandate, and she does it the right way. And she pushes it up the steep embankment, and she's walking towards the bridge, and successfully she gets to the top of the bridge, and they have crossing guards on the pedestrian side and on the vehicle side. And at the time she walks up the bridge, there's no alarms, there's no whistles, and the crossing guards are up in the up position. So she legally and lawfully gets on the bridge, and without any expectation, unbeknownst to her, the crossing or the bridge tender pushes the button that would ultimately turn out to be a slow mental and physical death sentence for Carol. The bridge tenders are not only supposed to monitor the cameras and the monitors, look at the mirrors, they're supposed to physically come out onto the balcony and do a visual to make sure that the pedestrian walkway and the cars are no longer on the bridge. Not just one time. They're not supposed to do it twice. They're supposed to do it a minimum of 3 times. So right there we had 5 opportunities to avoid this tragedy. She's clinging on for dear life, and there's still another safety protocol that the bridge tender could have taken. The emergency stop button could have been pushed to prevent Carol from falling. It literally within 20 feet of the bridge tender, right directly in front of them, was Carol clinging on. And the bridge tender failed to produce this safety measure to stop the bridge from going up. We have 6 abilities to prevent this tragedy. None of them were taken.
It was 7 minutes. I was horrified.
And then I learned that she had fallen on concrete.
She fought for her life for probably what seemed a lifetime to her.
Just thinking about her falling and how scared she had to be.
I can't imagine the terror she went through.